Hello Thrivers, welcome to another episode of the Made to Thrive show. I've got Dr. Craige Golding, specialist physician, and sits on the scientific advisory board of Made to Thrive, and what a privilege and honor it is to have him with us today. I think he ran Rosebank ICU for 8 years, so he's both got clinical practice. He's a teacher of teachers. I think you've trained thousands and thousands of practitioners, Craige, and I'm so absolutely excited about this podcast because there's so much confusion about COVID, about the coronacoaster, about C19, about lessons learned in 2020, as well as this vaccine. Well, we're not pro-vaccine, we're not anti-vaccine. We want the correct news and not abuse. Pharmacological vaccines have helped millions upon millions, and so we do want to take the best of what Western medicine can offer us and ensure that we have public safety. And so that's why I'm speaking to Craige. He's the second time on the show, so welcome to the Made to Thrive show, Craige.
Thanks, Steve.
So good. Tell us about lessons learned, Craige, from 2020. It's been probably the biggest year from health in terms of my own existence, where people have become aware of general health, public health, and their personal health. What can we learn from 2020?
Yeah, good question. I think there's been a few hard lessons learned. The one lesson that I've learned is that the susceptible population to COVID has generally been those with mitochondrial fatigue. It took me a while to connect the dots. Because initially we started seeing people with hypertension getting COVID, the aged population, people with diabetes or comorbid conditions. Those were the more susceptible with the first strain that came along. And what we found without fail is that those who have mitochondrial fatigue are more prone to a long COVID syndrome and more prone to getting the virus in the first place. Other lessons learned, well, lots. You know, we learned that fear and anxiety can run your immune system down.
Yep.
And you know, the mask hasn't helped in terms of the adrenal response with anxiety and the sympathetic nervous system being activated. But you know, unfortunately, we haven't had a choice. We've had to wear masks. We've had to wash our hands, sanitize, and try and protect ourselves and others from transmission of the virus. So there've been some hard lessons, but some valuable lessons that I think we've learned along the way. Another few is that looking after your immune system is of paramount importance. I mean, that's a no-brainer. And a lot of talk about vitamin D and the importance of that particular vitamin in preventing COVID. You know, in integrative functional medicine, we've been honed in on vitamin D for many years, but I think COVID highlighted the importance of vitamin D. I think when I started integrative medicine a good 13-14 years ago, we thought vitamin C was the most important vitamin for your immune system, and now with COVID there's little doubt that, I mean, vitamin C is still very important, as are the other vitamins and minerals, and you know, a healthy nutritional balance. But we found that vitamin D has really come up over and over as one of the most important vitamins to have at optimal levels to prevent COVID.
Brilliant. And we're going to jump into those weeds of vitamin D, vitamin C, things like zinc, and you know, other sort of minerals that are, you know, really important for your immune system. But I want to introduce you guests to the new health minister, and he's going to dictate health policy. What is actually going to help the public in general? What should they know? Because there's just so much confusion. You know, I've dealt with so many clients, so many patients, you know, that are just confused. They don't know who to believe. They don't know what to believe. They don't know actually even in terms of what to do. If you're the health minister, Dr. Golding, if you were the health minister, what would you be saying on national television? Because I just feel there's a shortage of actually people coming out and saying these are the things that you need to adopt in your lifestyle. There's been a lot of talk about sanitization. There's been a lot of talk about masks. There's been a lot of talk about these measures, but there's been not enough talk and declaration of what the person themselves can do. What can people do personally?
I think, you know, when it hit us last year, March, what came out in the initial few months was the use of ionophores like quercetin, and then there was a big story about hydroxychloroquine, and it works similarly in that it's an ionophore, gets zinc intracellularly, and that helps your immune system you know, build up a robust response and help you fight off COVID. So that was one of the first things that came along, was the use of quercetin and zinc. And then later on, because I do a lot of work on minerals and metals, we became aware that people were really almost over supplementing zinc. And the problem with that is that you can get an imbalance in your zinc copper ratio, and that can affect your energy levels and your mitochondrial function, because copper is very important for complex 4 in your mitochondrial and electron transport chain. So just a rule of thumb, it's much deeper than this, but as a rule of thumb, for every 20 milligrams of zinc, you should probably take a milligram or 2 of copper. So it's about a 20-to-1 ratio. So that came through first, and then a whole lot of other drugs came along, you know, like remdesivir, antiretrovirals, hydroxychloroquine, intravenous steroids when you're ill. Then we discovered that there was a very robust cytokine response with the thrombophilia, and the ICU patients that got really sick got a acute respiratory distress syndrome. So those are all facts that we can't deny. You know, people have gotten very, very sick, and you got this consensus from some that it was all a hoax and not real, and then you got this other consensus that it's a very deadly disease. So then we started to realize that it really is quite a spectrum of disease, from asymptomatic carriers to those that have a common cold like you know, symptomatology, and those that are seriously ill, arriving in ICU with thrombophilia and ARDS requiring ventilation, IV dexamethasone, and all sorts of you know, invasive therapies. So it is a confusing subject because there's such a spectrum. So I think that's the first thing to understand, is that it's not a hoax. It's a very real, very serious virus. I've seen and heard of some, and I'm sure we all have, you know, very serious conditions and mortalities. So it's a serious virus, and we need to do our best to support our immune system. So that is the one thing we can do for ourselves. So eating a high antioxidant-rich type diet, a lot of, you know, fruit and vegetables, organic, will help promote a healthy immune system and help prevent in the first place. Obviously, prevention is key. If you can prevent yourself from getting it in the first place, then all the better.
So let's sort of just summarize there. Eating a healthy, nutritional, sort of dense diet that's free from processed foods, the sugars, the seed oils. You know, people can look at their diet. Is that correct? Would you say that's the lowest hanging fruit that people can, you know, they're watching the show now, they're listening, they're in their cars. Is diet the biggest factor, or is it, you know, just being able to deal with stress? Is it breath work? Is it the biohacking that we're going to jump into? What is the lowest hanging fruit that people can do to actually improve their immune system?
Well, I think a colourful plate. So a high antioxidant-rich, you know, food choice. So fruits, as we know, the larger fruits can be quite high in sugar. So I'm not saying go and eat every fruit that you can find, but a colourful plate is the way to go, because that's very antioxidant-rich and very immune supportive. And as I always say, when it comes to any health condition, it's about food and supplements. So I would check your vitamin D level, try and get that to 60 nanograms per mole, supplement vitamin D. And then certainly, you know, a little bit of zinc, like 25 milligrams, vitamin C, quercetin, those types of supplements, very, very useful, and they've been used a lot since the COVID outbreak in South Africa in February, March last year. So I think food and supplements is you know, the one thing that you can do for yourself. And then obviously the law is to wear masks in public, and if you are ill or have any symptoms, to quarantine yourself at home for a few weeks, and then obviously let your doctor know. And if admission is required, then obviously a COVID, let's call it a COVID-friendly hospital, a hospital that's admitting COVID for treatment. Because some of the clinics and some of the labs and some of the out-hospital centres aren't actually seeing positive cases, because if they do, they would have to close the clinic for a few weeks.
Okay. All right, so food, supplementation, I think that's very, very important. But a person out there, in terms of exercise, in terms of purpose, in terms of community, what would you suggest that people, and things that you've learned? Because I think we did our first interview, you were the first guest on the Made to Thrive show, and that was like, I think, in early April. So what's changed from an exercise point of view, or from a dietary point of view? What's new?
I don't think much has changed. I mean, we know that exercise is so important for your immune system, no doubt about it. Sitting on the couch and gorging and eating food and not exercising and being active is obviously not good for your immune system. It's counterproductive. But remembering that too much exercise, over-exercising, can obviously raise your cortisol levels and actually inhibit your immune system. So it's got to be within moderation.
Yeah.
But definitely a good point that you raise is not just about food and supplements. It's all the lifestyle measures, and exercise is right up there, as is sleep. We've spoken about this before, but sleep is in its own way biohacking. You mentioned that word
absolutely.
Earlier. And we both have Oura rings where we check our sleep quality. So lifestyle isn't just about food, it's also about exercise, sleep, managing stress, adequate hydration. All of these lifestyle measures are all important. You can't ignore one of them, really.
Now, someone sitting out there, who do they see? The traditional, general practitioners or medical doctors, I believe they're excellent. I think they've got good intentions, but they're obviously not sort of educated traditionally in nutrition, in supplementation, in doing functional medicine, being part of the South African Society of Integrative Medicine. It does take a lot of training, and I've been on your course, which was really, really informative. There was a lot of information. It was, highly valuable. I've been doing functional medicine for over 10 years now. But what do people do? Who do they see? Do they see a health coach? Do they see someone who's trained in nutritional sort of science? Where do they go? What do they do? Because traditional doctors will save your life, which is fantastic. If it's a medical emergency, absolutely. But to prevent sickness and to prevent disease, a lot of them aren't into that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And most often people are reactive rather than proactive. And doctors as well, we train to be reactive. So if somebody comes to you with an acute illness, you treat that illness. And very often you're not focused on prevention, which is so important. So I would say step one is to look after your lifestyle, food, supplements, exercise, sleep, looking after yourself.
Yeah.
If you realize that you are out of shape, let's say you're very obese, or you have type 2 diabetes or lifestyle related diseases, or you're chronically fatigued, or you know that you're unhealthy, then I agree. Then I think a functional integrative practitioner or a functional nutritionist is of enormous value. These kinds of practitioners like us, we can do nutrigenomics, we can assess the preventive markers like vitamin D and homocysteine and inflammation markers and sugar, HbA1c, these kinds of markers, and then take preventive measures to try and, with lifestyle measures and nutritional interventions, try and reverse disease and prevent other diseases from occurring. I mean, even type 2 diabetes, adult onset type 2 diabetes, translates later to huge risk for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cancers and other serious degenerative diseases of aging. So I think the functional integrative practitioner is here to stay, because we really are very focused on prevention of disease and reversal and management of chronic disease, whereas the traditionally trained doctor is very focused on reactive acute interventions, which is not really good. It's really good, but it's not fantastic for the prevention of disease long term.
Yeah, agree with you. Even the debate and discussion about what level of vitamin D there's just so much confusion. The range I think was 30 to 160 mg per ml previously. Now the range has dropped to like 30 to 60, meaning now you want to be on the upper end, and there's just confusion about vitamin D and where you should get it, mainly from the sun or from supplementation. How important it is to ensure that you get that conversion from that cholesterol into vitamin D, and how important that process is in the body. But it seems to be there's a lot of confusion, because someone will come back and say, I've got 50 mg per ml, my doctor said it's too high. What does a person do out there? How much research should they do?
Yeah, I think the important distinction there is between normal and optimal. So you'll see the lab reference ranges always reporting a normal value. So you'll see a vitamin D level of 30 reported as normal, around 33, and as you say, upper normal up to 50 or 60, or high, they'll report it as high, whereas optimum we know is 50 to 60. Up to 100 is quite safe, toxic only above 125. So that's the distinction. One must know your normal as well as your optimum reference ranges. And the problem with acute medicine or orthodox medicine is that they invariably are only using normal reference ranges, and that's 95% of the population who at that time doesn't have disease. But of that population, a large percentage go on to develop disease. That's why we've ascertained the optimum reference ranges to actually prevent disease, and that's what the levels are that you should be aiming for.
So just like people know about their tax and their finances, Dr. Golding, and they know about their car, and they know the basics to make sure that the tire pressure is correct, they're doing an oil change, they're able to put a bit of maybe water, in their car. What does the average person who's listening out there, what are maybe the top 10 blood tests that they should know, that they should research? I mean, we're in the information age. I always try and encourage my clients, my executive coaching clients, take some accountability of your own health. You should know certain values. If you don't know what the optimal value of vitamin D is, it's a problem, or ferritin. What are the top 10 blood tests that people should take accountability for? Because at the end of the day, you've got to run with it yourself. Your financial advisor can advise you about your finances, but you've got to know the numbers at the end of the day. You've got to know that your car's working, and you've got to be able to do the basics. I mean, we don't encourage everybody to become a doctor and now study integrative medicine or functional medicine, but what blood labs or tests should they know?
Yeah, top 10 is quite a lot of tests. Stephen, I think it's ideal, in the ideal world, to have 10 tests. But maybe we should just start with 5.
Okay, 5. Go for it.
Because the others, I would say, are a bit variable depending on the patient profile. Otherwise, everybody would be running to the labs, and the medical aids won't be so impressed with us. But I do agree with you, there are some top tests that really should be known. So, for example, vitamin D, as you've mentioned. I love to do a CRP on everyone to see how much inflammation they have. I love to do an HbA1c to see how much glycation they have. A fasting homocysteine is invaluable. That tells you so much. That's an amino acid produced in your liver, a very important prevention marker to prevent heart disease, cancer, memory loss, bone density loss, and diseases associated with aging. So I put fasting homocysteine right up there.
Okay.
And then, conventionally, if you go for a checkup, invariably you're getting at least the blood pressure and a fasting lipogram. So I probably wouldn't miss that one. But I would do a little bit more than that. I'd probably do, if possible, a lipoprotein little a, or a fibrinogen, or a uric acid, some other vascular risk markers. And then if it warrants, and it normally does in an aging man, for example, older than, let's say, 40, 50 plus, I would do a PSA to check on prostate marker, and maybe even a CEA for colon, so a couple of tumor markers. And then you mentioned ferritin. It's also a very popular one. Because that can be a marker of iron absorption problems, and in South Africa we do have a lot of hemochromatosis cases, and it can also be a marker of inflammation, and inflammation drives all chronic diseases. So those are some of them. And then obviously in an aging man and woman, we want to check hormones as well. So you may want to do adrenals, ovaries, or thyroid functions, and then others depending on the clinical situation of the patient. But I do agree there's some top tests that are very important to give you a risk profile, and to know what to deal with first.
Because if you're the health minister, right, you want to bring some type of testing within schools or universities, trying to empower people to know, to go to their doctors and say, well, these are the top 5 tests, this is what I need to monitor, this is what I need to audit. Surely they've got to have some type of education in this field.
Yeah, I agree. And in our courses, we cover the mechanisms of aging and the different tests to do for each of those mechanisms, and that's why my blood form looks different to the average other physician, because we're very honed in on preventive markers as well as making diagnosis of existing disorders. So it's very important that you raise that, and I think it's good that doctors get some education in this as well, so that they know how to prevent disease, not just treat it.
Great. Fasting insulin is a whole move. Insulin resistant people that have a sort of a normal glucose level, even a normal HbA1c, that's your 3-month average glucose level, and that can also be tricky now because there's a lot of research on HbA1c maybe not being as accurate just because of different iron profiles and that, and hemoglobin profiles. But what do you think about fasting insulin and maybe a body composition in terms of how much visceral fat you've got? There's a lot of research now that those that were insulin resistant had a bad outcome with COVID. I mean, it seems that a lot of people are insulin resistant. What is the ideal for a fasting insulin?
Yeah, that's a good one. I didn't mention it in the top 10, but maybe you're right there in mentioning it in the top 10 even. Reason being is that obesity and metabolic syndrome is one of the leading causes of morbidity and mortality in the world, because it translates to cardiovascular risk, diabetes risk, cancer risk, all cause mortality. So I think fasting insulin is very important. Maybe we should put it on our top 10, because people are so overweight and insulin resistant these days with the the current sad state of food available in supermarkets. So we aim for around 4, 5 to 10, 5 to 9 for a fasting insulin. But I like to use it in association with body weight circumference and or your body composition, as you say. The problem sometimes with body composition is if you just look at BMI, body mass index, for somebody who's really training hard and has a big muscle mass, their BMI can look much higher than what it actually is. So body composition is much more useful than just the BMI. So I would say waist circumference and fasting insulin have become increasingly important in the changing world, because we've seen more and more obesity as the decades have gone by. I mean, even as a practitioner, I've noticed every decade that goes by we tend to see more obesity and obesity-related problems. So good point there.
Great. I mean, a shout out to my podcast editor, Gideon. He's young and strong and fit and healthy, and he exercises. But there's supposedly this new variant on the C19 that's affecting the young people. I haven't seen it, causing probably like long COVID or conditions that result from COVID. Is this a reality for the young people? They seem to that they just bounce right back after getting it. They don't seem to be affected. Is this a concern about this variant?
Well, I think it is. I mean, it's been in the media, and I think we should pay attention to it. In my practice, I haven't seen this to be a problem, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It does exist. But we spoke about it earlier. Having a strong immune system is the best thing you can do. It's the number one thing you should do. So, young or old, a strong immune system is going to help fend off the virus in the first place. And generally speaking, younger people have healthier mitochondria, healthier immune system, and should be at lower risk to develop COVID. But the newer strain, the COVID-2 strain, as you say, it seems to be affecting the younger people more, and it's just a very important reminder that even young people need to take care and look after their immune systems to try and prevent this virus from affecting them.
Let's unpack quickly.
Them,
absolutely. And let's talk about fasting, intermittent fasting. Let's talk about sunlight, being outside, how important the environment is. I find fasting probably the greatest nutritional tool. I think we eat way too often, and maybe the diet, changing the diet's important, but eating less often really helps with your fasting insulin, your HbA1c. I've worn a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. I've seen what certain foods do to my my glucose and spike it up well over 9. How important is fasting and an outdoor light lifestyle?
Yeah, fasting has become almost fashionable these days. Keto diet was the big fashionable one the last few years, but fasting the last year or two, well, longer than that, but the last year or two has become increasingly embraced in integrative functional medicine and wellness medicine. And a lot of different ways of fasting. You can do restricted time eating, where you're eating less hours of the day. You can have 2 or 3 meals within a window of, say, 6 hours and spend 18 hours fasting. And that's variable. You can start with 12 hours, which is not so difficult for people, because you can finish your dinner early, fast overnight, which most people do anyway if they're not eating all the time, which some people do. Then you can fast overnight and have your breakfast as late as possible. So then you have a window or a longer window of fasting, and that is, as you say, been shown to have huge advantages to your metabolic profile. Fasting, insulin comes down, all your cardiovascular risk factors improve, your detox improves, your lymphatic system in your brain works better, your lymphatic system, all your detox systems work better. If you are fasting, it gives your immune system time to repair as well. So a lot of health benefits from fasting. Some people also embrace it's a little difficult for most of us to achieve, but alternate day fasting, where you only eat every second day. So fasting has become very popular, and for a whole host of beneficial reasons. So I think it's a really good thing.
Research back, science back, a lot of articles, proven over generations. I think this, it's been a spiritual practice, ancestral practice, and I think there's not too many people that shouldn't be fasting. Am I right?
100%. I think we can all benefit from it because of the reasons that I mentioned. There's always debatable things in medicine and different points of view, different opinions. But when it comes to fasting, I think that's kind of across the board accepted as an acceptable practice and a healthy way of living.
Great. Tell us about environmental factors, light, how important it is to get outdoor, and you run an amazing clinic here using different light frequencies, how important those frequencies are. You do IV light therapy, you've got a whole bunch of gadgets, which has been incredible, which I've actually experienced as well. How important it is to be outside, to get sunlight, the full spectrum of light. Talking about, I'm wearing my blue blocks for those thrivers that are looking, these are my summer glow that block 400 to 450 nanometers of light. That's really, really important for the junk light that we're exposing ourselves to. And so to get outside and receive that full spectrum of light, UVA, UVB, plus red light and infrared, is really, really important for your health. You've got receptors on your skin. You've got these very, very important receptors in your eye where melatonin is first made. But tell us, doctor, how important is your light diet?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, we mentioned earlier how important vitamin D is. So, the cholesterol conversion in your skin to 25-hydroxyvitamin D requires sunlight. So that's number one reason why we should be getting sunlight. And as you mentioned, there's a whole spectrum of light, and your mitochondria, which is your energy producing organelle in your cell, in our cells, and we have like 50 trillion of these cells in our bodies, is very dependent on light for energy production. And the different complexes in the electron transport chain respond to different colors of light, from ultraviolet and blue in complex 1 up to infrared and red light in complex 4, and yellow and green in between. So the full spectra is required for activation of your mitochondria. And we have a very lovely medical Weber laser light machine that we've imported from Germany, that we actually administer this light either via watch or intravenously. But a lot of people cannot afford such expensive luxuries, and the sun is out there for enjoyment and for its benefits. Obviously, in climates like South Africa and Australia, we don't want to overdo it. We don't want skin cancers and melanomas and all the aging associated with too much sun exposure. But it is important to get out there and exercise, get sun exposure. And it seems these days, especially living in a city like Johannesburg, like you and I do, if you don't make the effort, you spend your day in the office and you get very little sun exposure. So you've got to make the effort to get out there, be active. And also, the sunlight is so important for serotonin and as you say, melatonin. So good for mood, good for sleep. Really important that we don't forget the importance of light.
Brilliant. And we're going to sort of just now pivot and move towards vaccines. Just a reminder on the disclaimer, the Thrive Nation, this is not medical advice. There's no patient-doctor relationship here. This is for entertainment purposes and education purposes. Please speak to your physician before you take anything on board. We are not anti-vaxxers. We are not pro-vaxxers. We want the correct use of these vaccines. Give us the lowdown as clear and as and concisely as you can, because we could speak on hours. I've listened to so many podcasts from the Western A. Price Foundation, these immunologists overseas talking about it rather being gene therapy, Dr. Golding, more than actually a vaccine. This mRNA vaccine is totally different to the traditional vaccines that have saved millions of lives, the polio vaccines and the measles vaccines that have really been incredible overall for public health, obviously with their side effects. And I think there's ways you can do it as an integrative medical practitioner to help patients not increase the toxic load with these vaccines. But tell us about the COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, as you said, it can be, well, let me put it this way. Discussing vaccines can be an inflammatory topic. And the reason I use that term is because if you're either an anti-vaxxer or a pro-vaxxer, you can be at the two poles of the truth. So I'm very careful to talk about vaccines because you don't want to get yourself into trouble being a medical practitioner yourself. But it is true, this messenger RNA is a concern because it becomes a gene experiment, and we're not sure what the long-term effects are going to be on introducing foreign messenger RNA into the human body. That said, you hear so many different opinions about this, that it is considered safe and that it's not going to have any long-term genetic consequences. We just don't know at this time what this mRNA effect is going to have. And also, when you have viral infections for a long time and vaccines are tested for a long period of time, then some kind of safety data can be accumulated. what long-term safety data do we have on a virus that's only just recently caused this epidemic, or pandemic? So safety issues are sometimes a concern. The mRNA is sometimes a concern, and vaccines, we know in general, we know that mercury has been removed from the majority of vaccines, other than the flu vaccine, which still has some aerosol. But the vaccines do have aluminium in, which can cause an inflammatory autoimmune response. That's why I said discussing vaccines can be an inflammatory issue, because you can rub somebody's feathers up on their back, or you can cause inflammation from a vaccine because they contain aluminium. The counter argument is that you want the aluminium in to cause inflammation, to cause an immune response. So you want an immune response so that you have an immune response against the vaccine and build up, in theory, immunity against future infection from the virus. So I'm glad you said that we're not anti-vaxxers or pro-vaxxers, because it's a bit silly to be completely on one end where there is value for it. I mean, we know we have susceptible individuals in our country, especially. We do have a lot of people who are aged, people who have diabetes, people who have immune deficiency states, people who have HIV and TB and diabetes, and all sorts of comorbid conditions, even blood pressure and obesity. So these susceptible individuals, I think, may derive great benefit from the vaccine. So to say to everyone, don't vaccinate at all, would be irresponsible, I think. So I think for the appropriate population group, the vaccine may have huge benefit. I can tell you, I have a little trick up my sleeve. If I do get to do the vaccine, which I haven't even been offered the opportunity to do yet, I would probably do a bit of immune supportive vitamins around the time, and I would do horsetail herb after to get the aluminium out of my system, because I know that aluminium accumulation in the body is associated with autoimmune problems and inflammatory conditions, and we see this sometimes with autoimmune conditions like lupus and Hashimoto's. I'm not saying the vaccine will cause that, I'm saying aluminium can cause it. So we have ways of getting the aluminium out the body after the vaccine. So there are ways to look after your immune system and do the vaccine in a safer or safest way possible. So yeah, it's such a difficult topic, and you're going to hear, the more you read, the more confused you get about the safety of it. But I always say to myself, whenever I'm considering a treatment, number one, is it effective? And number two, is it safe? And I'm not sure I know the answer to either of those questions, to be honest.
And I think that's so important, Dr. Golding, because at the end of the day, if we don't know those answers, to take the risk by taking the vaccine so prematurely might cause significant problems. And this is gene therapy considered by many, changing your genetic material, your epigenetic expression of these genes. I think it's way too early generally. Having said that, there are people that have got high risk comorbidities that are probably going to be doing better by taking the vaccine.
And frontline hospital workers.
And frontline hospital workers, and I think that is important to a certain degree, but I like to tell the Made to Thrive sort of community that in 22 years I've never missed a day's work. Haven't had Western medicine in over 22 years, and even when I battled with the virus for a while, I still had the nutraceuticals, the supplementation, the diet, the lifestyle to naturally fight that virus. And for people that have a robust immune system, does it make sense to take this vaccine?
Let's say probably not.
Okay.
I wouldn't say definitely, but probably not. Because as you say, with lifestyle and even good food choices and supplements, you can have a very healthy, robust immune system. And at the end of the day, immunity is what it's about. And does vaccination lend you immunity? Not really.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key, and now having problems with AstraZeneca vaccine now, and the problems that it's been causing in Europe, and the possible recall of this vaccine, I think it's just too early to tell what the repercussions are from this vaccine.
Yeah, and the repercussions may be decades down the line. Who knows with the mRNA issue? So, yeah, I think there is a bit of concern about safety long term.
With the SARS-CoV-1, they tried to get a vaccine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and they were unable to have a vaccine that actually was, effective.
Exactly, and as you rightly said, and I think we both agree that it's probably too soon, right? I mean, they need to do much more lab work and long-term studies on the vaccines, and it does seem a little strange. Let's not say hugely strange, because we want to be careful with what we say, but it seems a little strange that so many companies were able to develop vaccines this quickly.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about things like the doctors that I got a little clip from YouTube that said that smoking was helpful for your health initially, the thalidomide and what happened there into pregnant mothers caused major problems. The medical community has called these things safe many times over the years and then proven later that it's not safe. I mean, do people trust exactly what's happening with these pharmaceutical companies or not? They're sitting now, they need to make a choice. Who do they consult? Their medical doctors and integrative medical practitioner. How do they make this choice?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because you don't know, as we've said a couple of times, you don't know who to believe. I don't even know the answer to that question. I would say get a few opinions. Read as much as you can. Listen to both ends of the story. I do think an integrative practitioner is the way to go when it comes to long-term decisions with your health. Acute illness, we've mentioned this, conventional medicine, orthodox medicine stands up strong, but long-term health choices, not always the best decisions are made by orthodox medicine. So I think I'm very grateful and proud to be involved with functional integrative medicine. It's given me a much better perspective of health and wellness that we're not taught in conventional medicine. So to answer your question, I would say I would consult an integrative practitioner to make such choices.
Fantastic.
Or before making such choices. It still comes up to you to make the choice. Right? So, but I think guidance for long-term health decisions should come from an integrative practitioner.
Just a quick one. Initially they said when this C19 virus gets out into the townships and the people that are living in such densely populated areas that are right next to each other, not practicing social distancing, it's going to go rough, it's going to spread, millions are going to die. We haven't seen that in South Africa. They haven't practiced social distancing, they haven't sanitized, they're living in sort of very difficult conditions without correct water sanitation in these processes. We haven't seen that. What is your view on that? Because it's been surprising, and there was all this fear regarding our African population, or those that are sort of underprivileged in South Africa, getting this virus and spreading it like wildfire and having millions of dead bodies in the street. What do you think has been sort of the benefit of South Africa?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I don't think anyone knows the real answers to that, except that perhaps herd immunity was built up because of the locations and the poorer communities being in such close proximity to one another. I think herd immunity was built up without us even realizing. So perhaps that. And then also, different populations have different susceptibilities. So it seems as though, although we have had a number of cases, let's face it, we can't negate those.
Sure.
But it seems as though the effect on the African population hasn't been as large as we anticipated, and that's very pleasing, because I think some of us were very worried that it may be way worse.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about health coaching, speaking to people overseas from the podcast who are linked to James Maskell's work at the Cleveland Clinic with Dr. Hyman, saying that community is the greatest force to bring about sustained change. And Dr. Mark Hyman, and I know you know him, does group visits. He uses a health coach. What is the future of health coaching? Would you embrace a health coach within your practice? Because doctors are not really trained to bring about sustained change in patients. They spend the time, they're highly specialized, they look at the specific work, they send patients on their way, they might see them every 3 months or every 6 months. What is the role of a health coach in South Africa, and do you see you running group visits and using health coaches more?
Well, I'm super keen on getting health coaches involved. I mean, at the moment I've been doing some work with Dale Bredesen and the Bredesen Recode program for cognitive decline reversal. And I've been seeing a number of patients and using Bredesen Recode and getting good results. And I actually spoke to him the other day on a Zoom call, and the idea is to get health coaches more involved. And that is the plan. I have tried in my practice over the last few years to get some health coaches, but we've just found a bit of a barrier in the South African market in that a lot of the patients don't want to pay extra for the health coach, they'd rather just see the doctor. But the health coach is hugely advantageous in that they can spend more time, that's number one, and they can spend more time on the lifestyle measures. So for example, they can work out an exercise and food program for you, they can discuss the supplements with you in greater depth, they can explain things to you in greater depth over more time, so that you clear with your program. So I think going forward, it's going to be embraced more in South Africa. I know in the US, and I know a lot of the practitioners in the US really embrace the health coach alongside their practices or inside their practices, and even a functional nutritionist. So I'm super keen. It's just something I've been battling to get integrated into the practice, because economic times are not easy, and most people don't want to pay for 2 or 3 practitioners. So perhaps the way forward would be to have a umbrella fee for practitioners that includes the coach, and I think that may be the way to go.
Oh, that sounds good. So that people have one sort of price to pay, but then they get someone else
the
walking.
dietitian, they get the life coach as part of the, let's call it a package deal.
Yeah.
I think
Because at the end of the day, they want sustained transformation. They don't want to be in the same. And we see this. Well, I see this as a performance coach, as a health coach, and as a practitioner. My other lifestyle is you see people do well for 6 months, maybe a year. They feel a lot better, and then 2-3 years time, they're back to where they were.
100%.
Yeah. All right, tell us about where it's going to go to this year, this possible third wave coming. Craig, is it going to happen? Is it going to cause as much damage to the public? There's a lot of fear and anxiety with regards to this third wave, how it's affected people's health and sort of just the health overall of the population. Is this going to burn out now? Is the vaccine going to just dispel fear, which is going to have such an improvement on people's immune system? What does 2021 look like?
Well, time will tell. I don't think any of us know for sure what's going to happen. I think there's been some speculation that a third wave is coming probably around Easter time, maybe Cape Town, the Eastern Cape area, Western Cape. We'll have to see. And as you say, there's interventions. People can make their own lifestyle changes, do their supplements, consider the vaccine effects, and whether that's going to have a profound influence or not, time will tell. I mean, we don't know. So will there be a third wave or not? I'm not going to put my head on a block with that one. I'll wait and see, and look after my own immune system and my patients in the meantime.
Great. We've seen a lot of long COVID or post-COVID syndrome. There might be people struggling out there that have had C19. They're starting to have maybe heart discomfort. I've seen patients that are just tired, fatigued. They're not. The emotional status has been affected, and I don't know if it's fear of getting it again. If someone's got symptoms after C19, what should they do? Should they be concerned?
Yes, for sure. The long COVID, the 3-month syndrome, is largely associated with a severe fatigue type syndrome. And you and I both know the importance of mitochondrial function in health. And that seems to be the key. So mitochondrial function restoration seems to be the answer there. And there's a number of mitochondrial nutrients that one can use, like coenzyme Q10, PQQ, acetyl-L-carnitine, magnesium, ribose, and others. B vitamins and other nutraceuticals, so you can restore mitochondrial function, and I think that's very key for these long COVID syndromes. And then obviously restoring your immune system and overall body health, a holistic approach to restore your health. But we are seeing more of it, and I've seen actually the last 3 months I've seen a good handful of cases of long COVIDs where they were tested last year positive, and yet they're coming for the first time with a protracted fatigue type syndrome. And after investigations, it turns out that they are mitochondrially fatigued, and when you focus or hone in on the mitochondria, you can really restore their health.
What we haven't spoken about is hyperbaric, HBOT, and being used in the States, hydrogen peroxide nebulization, which has been an incredible technique or modality that people have used. Tell us about HBOT and what it can do for long syndrome or long COVID syndrome or any effects from COVID. Is it something that's very useful?
Yes, it is. I think it's useful for even people without COVID because it has very, very profound anti-inflammatory effects and profound effects not only on lung function but also on systemic function. So hyperbarics and hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT for short, is very well known in the anti-aging community, the integrative functional world as well. So yes, it would have effect because obviously a long infection causes chronic inflammation. So anything that's anti-inflammatory, like your hydrogen peroxide nebulizations, which also are antiviral and viral killing and bacterial killing, these kinds of therapies will be anti-infective and anti-inflammatory, so will have huge benefit. But I wouldn't say wait for COVID to do your HBOT. I would say do it anyway, because it's really, really beneficial to your long-term health.
Great. Just the last thing before we sort of finish up is about the microbiome. We spoke about it in sort of, episode 1, looking at Josh Axe and eating dirt with, all the sanitization now. And we use a Thieves sanitization, which is made up of essential oils and that for my children and for my wife, because I'm really concerned about just killing all the good bacteria on our hands, and that people are not touching things, they're not hugging, they're not holding hands, there's no contact. What's going to happen to the microbiome of the skin, of our guts? How can people restore this other than using supplements, which people do know about probiotics and those fermented foods? What can people do to help this microbiome?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I know with me seeing patients all day, I'm just as susceptible to changing my microbiome because I'm washing my hands all day long, and we use these sanitizers that are definitely destroying the microbiome in our skin. Fortunately, it's our hands that we're washing and not our whole skin repeatedly all day long. But there is this misconception that the microbiome only occurs in the gut, and that's not true. The lung has its own microbiome, the skin has its own microbiome. So restoring the skin microbiome is going to be a problem. I mean, we can start with oral probiotics, but I think we should probably be using less of these sanitizers and perhaps be using gentler soaps or gentler cleaning. I'm not sure. I mean, what are your points of view on that? It's not an easy question to answer, because patients also, when they come in here, the first thing we ask them to do is wash their hands and check their temperatures. And it's just kind of accepted practice. And if you go into a hotel or you go into Woolworths or the shopping mall, we're all washing our hands excessively. And I'm sure that's not doing us any good. I just don't know what the solution is.
I've seen a lot of dermatitis and eczemas and psoriasis that have just exploded because of this process.
It is, as you rightly say, it's microbiome change. I just don't know what the solution is, because it's almost illegal to walk in Woolworths now. They chase you out if you don't wash your hands.
Well, my recommendation is carry something natural like a Thieves, which is essential oils. It's got a product called alcohol denat, which is basically an alcohol that comes from plants, kills 99.9% of any sort of bacteria and viruses. That's number one. Number two, I'm just thinking about those people in the rural areas, and possibly they're barefoot, they're touching each other, they're in the mud. There's a lot of research saying that these rural areas in Africa have the least amount of autoimmune, and these highly sanitized places, countries like the Scandinavian countries, have a huge autoimmune problem. Could it be possible that these folk in the rural areas, in these highly dense areas, they're just sharing a lot of good bacteria, and that's why they develop this robust immunity?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's a very good point. Never gave it much thought, but I think that's very valid.
I know that this vaccine in many areas, and people have sort of just strengthened themselves because the fear has dissipated. From an emotional point of view, fear and anxiety, there's just been a plethora of this sort of anxiety regarding COVID. The vaccine dissipates it a lot, to a large degree. Can that be so important for someone if they have the vaccine, they're not fearing, they're not full of anxiety, and so the immune system improves?
Oh, that's a big factor. There's no doubt that fear and anxiety, it causes a cortisol response from your adrenal glands, which has a whole lot of deleterious effects. But in the setting of COVID, the most important is the immune suppressive effect. We know even if you take high-dose steroids, prescription steroids, that will also suppress your immune system, and that's used in medical practice in severely inflamed patients, for example. So yeah, I think relieving the fear and anxiety, it would be hugely advantageous to the immune system and really good long term, because we know long term protracted stress, which is exacerbated by fear and anxiety, just has no good effects. It suppresses all your hormones, suppresses your immune system, causes brain atrophy, all sorts of horrible effects on the human body.
Great. Well, I think we've covered everything, Thrive Nation. Is there anything we haven't discussed, or something that you want to let people know? We're going to put this up on YouTube, and we're going to really put some advertising behind this, because I think it's so important for people to hear what they can do personally. Gather around your community, gather around a health coach or a functional nutritionist or functional medicine doctor. I think it's crucial for your health. educate yourself. I think Dr. Golding, would you just tell us where people can find? I know you write a newsletter, you've trained thousands of practitioners, and those practitioners are helping so many patients and training others. Where can people find you, and where can they get more information on what you do?
Sure. I didn't think we should raise anything else right now. I think we covered quite a lot of topics, so that was really well done, Steve. I enjoyed that, actually. So for my articles, I write regularly for drcgolding.co.za. That's my website. You can look under articles. I write a lot of informative articles, and I publish them on Facebook as well. So you can just go to Facebook and look for my name, Craig with an E, Golding. Publish a lot of posts there. Teach a lot of doctors, as you say, through goldinginstitute.com. And I write a lot of articles for yourwellbeing.co.za, supplement company. And I write for medical journals and magazines, so I do spend a lot of time writing and teaching. It's two of my three big passions, the third being seeing patients as well.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm a little bit all over teaching doctors and also writing for magazines and websites.
Great, and you've dedicated your life to really improving people's lives, transforming people's lives, not only patients' lives, but doctors and their training. So, I mean, it's just been a calling that you've probably, I don't know how long you've been practicing as a specialist physician or medical doctor, but
22 years now.
22 years, and where do you see yourself going in the next years? I mean, obviously you run a very successful practice, and Thrive Nation, what I really respect and honor about Dr. Golding is he keeps on learning, he keeps on going on the courses, he keeps on educating himself. And what an example to you out there. If you're listening and you watching this, go and educate yourself, go and empower yourself, take accountability of your own health, because your health lies in your own hands. Take control of your health, because I think that's fundamentally important. But where do you see yourself going? Where are, we've spoken previously about Dr. Sinclair, anti-aging medicine. What's going to happen in your life and the latest cutting edge sort of tech that you're going to embrace over the next sort of 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of development. I think you will agree in the last sort of 10, 15 years in integrative functional medicine. That's been extremely exciting. So obviously like to stay up to date, and very much passionate about reversing cancers, advanced cancers, as well as cognitive decline. So I want to do a lot of work in those two fields especially, and also reversal of autoimmune conditions. So those are the three big chronic conditions that I have a lot of passion for and want to do a lot of work for. I think we'll see. I'd like to perhaps get a little bit more global, not just involved in South Africa. I do lecture in Germany and Asia every year. I'd like to lecture a bit more. Obviously, COVID has changed that.
Yeah, sure.
The teaching platform is more online these days. But yeah, I'd like to travel a bit more. Maybe get involved a bit with clinical research. Start publishing a bit more, maybe in medical journals. Lots of things to do. As you know, in medicine, there's just it's limitless. It's as long as you have your passion and you enjoy it, there's no end to what you can accomplish.
Great, and there's a lot of unique sort of modalities and techniques that Dr. Golding has sort of embraced here at the clinic. We haven't spoken about sort of your hypothermic treatment, your heat therapy. He's got HBOT over here. He's got the infrared sauna, so that we're big fans at Thrive Nation on infrared sauna, how important these techniques are. And the biohacking of Main to Thrive is very closely connected to Dr. Golding, who is this incredible practitioner with years of experience in both Western medicine, in natural medicine, in Chinese medicine. Really just an incredible amount of content and knowledge and experience. So we salute you at Made to Thrive. We look for a closer partnership. We've been discussing that, to put biohacking and Made to Thrive and the health coaches and community and all the pillars that we stand for at Made to Thrive together with the functional medicine practitioner who's on the cutting edge of science. And that's, as I said, reiterate, I respect that, because it's an ongoing learning process. What Dr. Golding was doing 10 years, he's not doing now, and I'm sure in 10 years' time, we possibly could have a South African doctor who can reverse cancer. Can we be so bold to say that? Someone who's dedicated their life to treating these incredible, difficult conditions. And so thank you so much. Send us your questions and comments. Please let us know what you'd like to discuss in the future. Dr. Golding is part of the scientific advisory board at Made to Thrive, and so we tap into his knowledge frequently. I'd love more contact, but it's just been a difficult season with C19, and hopefully we can partner more in the future. Thanks so much, Craig.
Pleasure.
Cool.
Stay well.
Great.